Buenos dias a todos. Good morning to all in Havana. Thank you so much for allowing me to present to you this today. It is my absolute pleasure. My heart is with you in Havana, and I'm sorry I'm not there. But hopefully in 2025, we can make it happen. Now, this morning's presentation seeks to explore the point of intersection between the countries of the Guiana Shield and how we can trade with them and increase our own trade here in the Caribbean. So I hope to make some key linkages between the opportunities the countries of the Guiana Shield can provide for the Caribbean, as well as what it can do to accelerate or speed up the implementation of the CARICOM single market and economy. Now, we all are familiar with the CARICOM context. We're all relatively small size islands with several severe constraints to growth. We have limited economic sectors and we are usually highly indebted. Aside from Guyana with the find of oil, we are generally vulnerable to global financial and economic crisis, as well as susceptible to all forms of natural disasters, which has led to some severe social vulnerabilities and increased poverty within the Caribbean. Now, Caribbean aside, there are several global events that have changed how we do business and how we live and how we integrate. First and foremost is the era of what we're in now post globalization. We're still dealing with COVID 19, but we have seen the evolution of the internet, online shopping, e commerce, and cybersecurity take prominence across our member states. In addition, we've had to deal with global supply chain issues, trade facilitation, as well as several challenges regarding logistics. And all of these are things that are outside of our control. Now, within the Caribbean, as we look at security, the current threat picture of the Caribbean shows us that we are dealing with maritime crimes, counterfeit goods, cybersecurity, financial crimes, pandemics, irregular migration, transnational organized crime, and even terrorism in some instances. So the question is, what can we do as it relates to solving and dealing with the global threats? What can we do as it relates to dealing with the security threats? And how can we cope with what is happening here in the Caribbean? And for me, the solution is always regionalism. Whether we choose to use ALBA, we choose to use CELAC, we choose to use UNISOR, PROSOR, CSME, or the OECS, the solution has to be grounded in a multidimensional approach. And this multidimensional approach has to come from a regional perspective. So, starting and laying it on the table early, I like to use Tadara's definition of economic integration. And Tadara speaks to economic integration occurring whenever a group of nations in the same region, ideally of relatively equal size and at equal stages of development, join together to form an economic union or regional trading bloc by raising a common tariff wall against the products of non-member countries while freeing internal trade amongst members. So from Tadaro, we should start to see an increase in trade between CARICOM member states. However, that is bearing we meet the same conditions. Tadaro speaks to the conditions of being in the same region. I would argue that the Caribbean is just too geographically dispersed from Belize in Central America to Bahamas close to North America, Guyana and Suriname in South America, and the rest of the island chain in the Eastern Caribbean. We are not ideally of the same relatively equal size, and we are definitely not at the same stage of development. So, if we talk about economic integration, we wouldn't necessarily meet the conditions. So, economic integration for the Caribbean has to be revised. Prime Minister Gonzalez speaks of integration of the willing, and we've had literature like Anthony Payne talk about the paradox of CARICOM. And I'm hoping that the Guiana Shield can represent for us a solution forward where we can look past the efforts of deepening economic integration and look to simple increasing trade amongst members. Now, this image shows you the challenges of managing a border when you are in a regional arrangement as well as in an internal arrangement like the OECS. So it shows essentially that you have to have a dual border management concept where you have an internal free circulation of goods. And with the internal free circulation of goods, there are no duties stopping goods moving between the OECS. But then externally, You need to have some infrastructure in place, such as joint revenue collection, processing of documents. You have to have specified points. You have to have common customs tariff and harmonized border charges across all member states. And these is something that the OECS that they have done successfully. This is where CARICOM now needs to go in the future if we are serious about increasing trade for the entire region. Now, just to give you a snapshot as to what it is we're importing, what it is when we talk about borders and trade, my own country of Barbados, we import, I would like to say 95% of what we consume realistically. So when you look at this chart, I'll do it comparatively. The majority of our imports for 2020 as relates to food has been corn and corn products, 16%, wheat and wheat products, 14%, soybeans, 12%, potatoes, 6%, and it goes down the line. When we look at Grenada for 2020, the majority of their imports, again, wheat products, miscellaneous, poultry, sugar, sweeteners, and then Trinidad and Tobago, again, wheat products as well as corn products. So you get those very basic inputs as well as sugar, those very inputs into food as the major imports for Barbados, Grenada, and Trinidad and Tobago for the year of 2020. So the question is, how can we decrease these imports for the region as well as increasing interregional trade? Now, looking at the Guiana Shield, and this is just a very basic graph that I got from the UN website, where it shows you the countries within the Guiana Shield comprising of Venezuela, Guyana, Suriname, French Guiana, and part of Brazil. Some persons would even include some aspects of Colombia as well, but for the sake of my own research, I've just included these 5 countries as an explanation of the Guiana Shield. Now, when we talk about economic integration for the Caribbean, we talk about the CSME, and the CSME is for us a larger economic space where we have more choices for consumers, greater opportunities for work as well as development. The CSME was launched in 2006 by these group of countries here, and I'm hoping that we will be able to see an increase in trade with these group of countries and the 5 countries of the Guiana Shield if we start to have targeted market trade approaches. So identify a market, identify a product that can be supplied or purchased by said market. Now, within the CSME, although it's been launched nearly 2 decades now, there are some pre-existing conditions which has led to some disadvantages for the CSME. First and foremost, because of our distance, we've had a challenge in terms of transportation and communication, which continues to constrain our implementation of the CSME. There's a pre-existing trade balance prior to CSME, and we still haven't had enough increased trade among CSME member states. In addition, there are other macro and micro factors which inhibit the implementation of the CSME, those regional institutions that should provide the needed infrastructure. So when we actually look at the imports for Guyana in 2022, Guyana's imports stretch from transport to chemicals to food to medicaments. But the majority of their imports came from the United States, 48.6% within our hemisphere. Trinidad and Tobago came second. Well, no, Brazil came second with 12.3%. Then Trinidad and Tobago, 11.9%. Suriname, and then it comes down the line with Suriname. And then we have Panama, Canada, DR, etc. And it comes down the line. So we start to see that from 2022, Guyana's major import partner has definitely been the United States. When we look at CARICOM between the period of 1995 to 2022, we start to see that the yearly exports of Trinidad has been driven by Guyanese exports towards 2022. And then the imports of CARICOM paints a different picture. We have the Bahamas, Jamaica, Trinidad, and Tobago as the top importers for CARICOM goods and extra-regional goods as well. So when we look at internal exports within CARICOM, the internal exports for 2021 would have been oil being the major internal export. But if we take out oil, you start to see rice. You start to see flavored water. You start to see beer. You see excavation machinery. You see passenger cargo ships and vessels. You also see frozen fish. These are things that we are exporting within ourselves, but at limited quantities. And for them within the region, these products are coming mainly from Guyana, 29.9%, Jamaica, Trinidad and Tobago, Barbados, Suriname, Grenada, St. Lucia, and then we come down the line in terms of just looking at internal exports within the hemisphere. So when we look at it up the world side now, on the other side, again, the major import from the rest of the world is definitely refined petroleum, which is on the left. But if we take out refined petroleum, again, we see our major imports are of the rice flavored water baked goods, the fish, gas bottles, etc. And again, these are coming from the United States predominantly. Then we would have United States, we have Netherlands, we have China, Germany, and it comes down the line. Whereas within the hemisphere, we have United States, then we would have Brazil, Canada, Colombia, Mexico, Dominican Republic. So you start to see some dominant players there. But what I'm arguing is that we do need to consider those countries in the Guiana Shield and what they can provide for us in the Caribbean, because if Guyana continues to develop its linkages with Brazil, we have a greater direct link to the Guiana Shield countries. And well, specifically Brazil for sure, with the bridge, we have a direct link, a direct, easier transport linkage across to get to Brazil. We also would have direct linkages to Suriname. And we can then connect the Guiana Shield easier, which would then make Guyana an excellent gateway for the Caribbean, because it can act as the point where goods are distributed from Guyana for the Guiana Shield into the rest of CARICOM. And those goods could definitely move across the entire CSME market. So when we look at the export opportunities, what are those goods that Guyana and Suriname can export for the rest of the Caribbean? There's opportunities in cocoa beans, fish, wood, oily seeds, bananas, coconut oil, animal feed. For Suriname, opportunities in oil, scrap aluminum, cement, mollusk, tropical fruits, fish oil, and other collector's items. And for Venezuela and Brazil, there are opportunities in the area of tropical fruits, palm oil, bran, precious metal ore, bananas, and Brazil, sorghum, titanium, coal, wood, nickel, other precious metals, raw copper, cobalt, and even dry legumes show a level of opportunities that these countries could export into our CARICOM single market and economy. But bear in mind, these exports need to be facilitated by strong logistics and a strong communication network as well. I often tell my students that countries don't trade, but people do. And with an understanding that we need to educate persons about what is available from these markets and identify key transport linkages to allow the goods to actually move. So some recommendations to actually start the conversation with trading with the Guiana Shield. We need to develop an innovative research program to match products to markets. We need to have data with immediate benchmarks so we can track the progress. And then we need to start thinking about reversing economic imbalances among the CSME participating states to improve the balances in favor of those smaller islands like the St. Kitts and Nevis, the Dominica, etc., so that we can have a more equal development across the single market. That's for me, ladies and gentlemen. I wish you all the very best for the rest of the conference and a happy and a Merry Christmas season. Adios.